Stephen Sondheim has worked late into the night, writing new lyrics for the revival of his 1976 musical, Pacific Overtures. Now, just days before opening night, he's in this rehearsal studio in Lower Manhattan to make sure those lyrics fit.
The bird from the sea, not knowing pine from bamboo, roost on anything. Exactly.
He's had 13 Broadway shows in the last 27 years and says he's especially fond of this one. That may be because it's so typical of Sondheim, so atypical for Broadway. Pacific Overtures is meant to be a Japanese musical for Western ears, an experiment in music theater.
That you hold tightly when you're toying with those.
It's still so startling and so fresh that, and still unlike anything that's been done either before or since, that it seems new. That doesn't feel like Brideshead Revisited to me. I mean, it doesn't feel like old territory at all. It's really as if we had just written it. It'll be interesting to see, in the case of Pacific Overtures, whether people take it differently than they did 8 years ago, because it had its partisans. I mean, there were people who absolutely adored it, and there were people who absolutely hated it. And that was certainly true of the critical reception, and probably less true of the audience reception, because the audiences generally liked it a lot. Certainly spoken to people who hated it a lot. And we'll see. I think an audience will enjoy it more and see it as the kind of kabuki vaudeville that it is.
Sondheim's experiments don't work for everybody. Still, many drama critics see him as a key figure, perhaps the key figure, in the American musical theater.
Certainly, Sondheim has he's taken this American art form and pushed it to new limits and given it, in a way, new directions.
Sondheim started out as a lyric writer. He was tutored by family friend Oscar Hammerstein and got his big break on Broadway after Leonard Bernstein met him and asked him to write lyrics for a musical that was experimenting with serious themes. The result was the 1957 smash hit West Side Story. Next came lyrics for Gypsy, but Sondheim decided that Gypsy was to be his last show as a lyric writer. From then on, he would write both lyrics and music. Out came a string of musicals, some hits, some flops, each one different and each one uniquely Sondheim. By the early 1970s, Sondheim had created a new kind of show, the plotless musical. Each one focused on a single problem of contemporary life. A little night music on the theme of romantic love had Sondheim's only popular hit song, Send in the Clowns.
You here at last on the ground.
Sondheim's collaborator on these and earlier musicals was producer-director Hal Prince. Last season, the two got back together for a production of their 1979 show, Sweeney Todd, which was presented at Lincoln Center by the New York City Opera.
It's F to D in B flat, in the key of B flat. Yep, both times. Da-dum, ba-dum. Okay, let's try it.
Sondheim has raced from the Pacific Overtures rehearsal to fine-tune an orchestra that is twice the size of the one he used when Sweeney Todd was on Broadway.
Okay. Right. You should play the first three-quarter notes. Right. First three-quarter notes and then leave it down. Okay. The other thing I want to...
Hal Prince was skeptical when Sondheim brought in the idea of putting a 19th century British play on stage as a musical.
Well, he got interested in it when he heard the songs. When I gave him just the Christopher Bonds play to read, he said his exact quote was, I can do this. But when I played him the first 7 songs, he started to get stimulated and started to think about how to do it.
I love it now.
Yeah. Oh, so do I. It's fun.
Sweeney Todd got Sondheim some of his most favorable reviews. Critics gave mixed reviews to Sondheim's Sunday in the Park with George, but it was one of the hottest tickets on Broadway and went on to win a Pulitzer Prize. The musical is based on a painting, Sunday on the Island of Grand Jatte, by the 19th century pointillist George Seurat. When Seurat sings the song Color and Light, he seems as obsessed about painting as Sondheim is about music.
Yellow and white. Blue and yellow and white.
Color and Light has to show George's intense, trance-like, obsessive concentration. So, which accounts for the basic theme, which is just so that he could do that, and then stop, and then do it again, and then stop. Primarily, the song's about intense concentration and obsession, and what you do when you trance out, when you're writing. When you trance out, when you work so intensely that the world has disappeared. And when you see a guy do that over and over and over again, and when he's all done, he's got a little, square inch of canvas done, and then he's got to do another square inch. Now he's got another square inch. Now another one. Now he's finished the hat. Now he's got to do another hat. Now he's got two hats, now he's got two hats. You realize, and that's of course the way everybody who makes art does it. You start with tiny details, and you build, and you build, and you build, and the big ball of silver paper is finally there. That's the important part. And there's someone in a tree, as opposed to, and there's someone in a tree. Don't make it such a love song. But
among all the experimental songs he's written, Sondheim likes best Someone in a Tree from Pacific Overtures.
Those are legato phrases. Ba-dum, as opposed to da-da-da-da-da-da. Bounce it a little bit,
In this song, the same character is shown at 3 different times in his life. That song was, it's funny now that we talked about Seurat, and that was a song I tranced out on. It took me about 3 weeks to write, but by the time I'd sketched out the basic idea of the lyric, I realized I was going to territory I had no intention of going into. All the stuff about the pebble and the stream and all those images, and the notion that we are each an individual part of a picture that cannot be changed. I can relate almost everything else I write to something else I've written, but that one seemed to have grown out in the field someplace. I don't know where it came from. It impresses me because of that. I just feel like I had a unique baby. Good. In Sondheim's townhouse in Manhattan, the walls are crammed with antique puzzles and games. He says solving puzzles is a lot like writing lyrics.
It's how do you fit a thought into so many syllables? How do you make the stresses work? How do you make the rhymes work? And, what do you do with consonants and vowels? And it's all like that.
That's it, exactly.
Sondheim counts on librettists like playwright John Whiteman, who wrote the original Pacific Overtures play, for many of his lyric ideas.
Oh, that's brilliant.
They will rework lyrics right up to the opening night of Pacific Overtures.
That's most rapid. That's terrific. First of all, one of the things that's happened is 8 years have gone by, and an audience's sense of time has changed, and there's certain more impatient. So what we essentially are doing is tightening up and sharpening and focusing the whole thing.
Sondheim's future is very much linked with the future of the musical theatre. If Sondheim succeeds, then the musical theatre will achieve a quite different level of communication from what has gone before. If he doesn't succeed, yes, I could even see the musical theatre just failing away into nothingness. There's no reason why it should continue, particularly if it cannot attract composers of the stature of Sondheim.
That's what's odd for an audience to take in on these shows, is in the first 5 or 10 minutes, what's going on here? If they just relax and let it flow, after about 10 minutes, they're into whatever the rhythm we have chosen is. And it happens in Pacific Overtures, because the rhythm of the story, not to mention the stage conventions, for the first few minutes are so unusual, as they are in Sunday in the Park with George, as they are in Sweeney Todd. There's been an awful lot of quite experimental musical theater in the last 8 years. And it won't seem quite so odd. And if they will just sit and relax and allow it to wash over them, it's not difficult to understand. It's a lot of fun.